The 15 months wait-out period cooling measure is finally removed. So yesterday when the announcement was released in the morning, we have a lot of sellers actually calling us, asking us if this is good news for them, whether they should increase their selling price. And on the other hand, I also have HDB buyers who feel that they are a bit unlucky because now they actually have to compete with more buyers. And also I have private property owners who were looking to right size, but they didn't want to rent. So now they are all frantically trying to apply for their HFE. But let's address the question on everybody's mind. Will this removal of the wait-out period actually cause HDB price to increase again? Sad to say, I don't think this change in policy will affect everybody, but instead a specific group of sellers will actually stand to benefit. I'll share with you today which group is this and why. But before we begin, we need to understand why this rule was implemented in the first place. So imagine we have two groups of buyers. The first group is just a young couple who just started working not long. They have limited funds, limited budget. And we have the other group, which is the condo right sizes. So they just recently sold their condo and they have large amount of sales proceeds. Who do you think will be able to offer a higher price for this HDB unit? So this was what the cooling measure was trying to target back then. So during COVID, there was a chain of events happening. So the first being the construction of BTO delays. So this means that buyers who have more urgent housing needs, they have to shift their focus to the resale market instead. So what happens next is this caused an imbalance in supply and demand, which resulted in the increase in HDB resale prices. Furthermore, during COVID, we had low interest rate environments. This means that it's cheaper to service a housing loan. So existing homeowners were able to use the increase in sales proceeds coupled with leveraging on the low interest rates, they were able to upgrade to a private property more easily. And in turn, this resulted in the private property prices to start increasing. So existing private owners saw a surge in their pricing and took the chance to right size into a HDB. So with large amount of cash on hand, they are able to offer a much higher price and even pay for COV. So back in 2022, before $1 million HDB were prevalent everywhere, I sold a Toa Payoh EA. It was in very original condition. Last renovated was 30 years ago. It's not even a high floor unit. So I sold this EA for more than $1 million and the COV was more than 100,000. And the buyer profile? They are the condo sellers. They recently cashed out from their condo and they do not mind paying a premium for something that doesn't downgrade their lifestyle. So the Toa Payoh EA actually gave them what they need: a bigger space, a good location, near MRT. So this was something that they were willing to pay a premium for, even though it means that they need to fork out even more cash after that for renovation. So resale prices were actually increasing very quickly. So if you see over here, this was in 2019, right before COVID, prices were more or less stable. And after COVID, we actually saw a very sharp increase in prices. So in 2021, overall, we actually see an increase in HDB resale prices by about 12.7%. And in 2022, we see a further increase by 10.4%. So this actually risks affordability, especially for our first-time buyers, because if the prices just keeps increasing so quickly, our first-time buyers might not be able to afford a home for themselves. So private buyers were actually an additional layer of demand. While some were right-sizing due to genuine needs, a big portion of them actually entered the HDB resale market with large amounts of sales proceeds, putting them in a much favorable and stronger position when competing for popular units. So if we see over here, the number of private property owners buying HDB resale flat, they actually doubled in 2021. And when we compare to other resale buyers, they are actually the ones that are paying higher prices, they are paying COV, and they are paying higher COV. But bear in mind, this 15 months wait-out period is actually part of a wider cooling package. So in December 2021, this is when the first cooling measure for HDB kicked in. The loan to value actually dropped from 90% to 85%. So this means that if you're buying a HDB, you no longer can loan up to 90% of the property price, but instead you can only loan up to 85%. Prices continued to increase. Hence, in September 2022, they implemented more cooling measures. The first being the loan to value, 5% it actually dropped to 80%. So from 90% to 80%, it's actually quite a huge drop. Okay, so this 10% means that if you are buying $1 million HDB, now your down payment will have to increase by 100,000. So 100,000 will be in the form of cash and CPF. Not only that, they increase the interest floor rate when computing the mortgage servicing ratio, meaning to say that the loan amount that a buyer can loan actually drops and you will need more down payment for the same quantum. And next, they actually introduced the 15 months wait out period. And in August 2024, the loan to value dropped from 80% to 75%. This entire series of cooling package is actually meant to moderate demand and to keep HDB resale prices affordable, because after all, this is public housing that we are talking about. And in July 2026, finally, the 15 months without period cooling measure has been removed, which means that the government feels that this temporary cooling measure is no longer required because demand has been moderated and HDB resale prices are now stable. Okay, so just a quick summary, this 15 months without period is a temporary cooling measure. It is to moderate the demand for HDB resale flats. However, seniors purchasing 4 rooms or smaller flats, they are exempted. We also want to understand why are they removing it now, and why are they so confident that by removing this, it will not cause another spike in the HDB market. So if you have been monitoring the property news, I think this is not a surprise to you that the HDB prices have been slowing down in the recent quarters. So in the last quarter of 2025, we actually saw 0% growth. This is very interesting because in 2025, we actually saw the record number of $1 million HDB flats. However, with the average being 0%, means that there are some HDB unit types in some estates that are actually facing negative growth already. Otherwise, the average wouldn't be 0%. Then in the first quarter this year, HDB prices finally dropped for the first time in 7 years. Okay, it's just a 0.1% drop quarter on quarter, and in the last quarter, it dropped another round of 0.3%. And if you have read the press release by MND, they have highlighted another reason why they are comfortable to remove this measure right now, and that is the increase in MOP supply. So if you see over here in 2025, we have 8,000 units that's going to MOP, 2026, 13,500, next year we have 15,000 units, and in 2028, we have 19,500 units that's going to MOP. I mean, that's not going to say that all these MOP owners are definitely going to sell their unit, but one thing for sure is that there will be an increase in supply in the resale market coming from this MOP. Not only that, HDB have also been increasing the BTO supply. In 2026 alone, we have 19,600 flats up for application, and HDB mentioned that they are on track to offering about 55,000 flats in total from 2025 to 2027, and they also mentioned that they might increase more BTO if demand requires. So this channels out some demand from the resale market to the BTO market. So even though demand is coming back to the market, we also have an increase in supply that is coming into the market as well. So we are no longer in the same market as compared to in 2021 and 2022, where we have very little supply and very high demand, which caused the prices to increase. So this is why the government is confident to remove the cooling measure right now, because every segment of the HDB market is ready to absorb this extra demand. So what does this mean for you? How will it impact you, and what will happen to the market next? Just because demand is coming back, it doesn't mean that the entire HDB market will see an increase in prices overnight. I will be breaking down the impact on HDB owners looking to sell by unit type. However, if you're a buyer looking to enter into the HDB market for the first time, a private property owner looking to explore your next move, whether it's right sizing or upgrading, and even landlords, please note that this policy change will affect you in one way or another. So if you're wondering how this change will affect you personally, please reach out to me and I will share more with you in person. So now let's take a look at the impact on the HDB sellers by bedroom type, starting from the smaller units. The 15 months without period was implemented in September 2022. If private property owners are major buyers for the 3-room and 4-room flat type, then after implementation of this 15 months without period, we should see a big drop in volume. However, is that the case? So if we take a look over here, I've pulled out the total number of resale applications that were submitted for the 3-room flat. So in September 2022, after the 15 months wait-out period was implemented, we actually do not see a drastic drop in volume, but instead it increased slightly by 10, okay? And subsequently in 2024, it jumped furthermore. So this is very obvious to us that private property owners are not the major buyers for 3-room flat. Hence, I feel that the 3-room flats will not see any big changes after the 15 months without period has been removed. Okay, and if we take a look at the 4-room flats, same thing. We actually see that after implementation of the 15 months without period in September 2022, there isn't much change, remain relatively the same. In 2024, there was a slight increase, and then in 2025, there was a bigger drop, probably due to the offering of more BTO units. So this means that removing the wait out period will unlikely affect the smaller HDB types in terms of volume and prices. That being said, I think it's interesting to find out why the 3-room flats and 4-room flats are so resilient in terms of their transaction volume as well as the prices, even though private property owners are not their major group of buyers. I would say the reason is actually due to the BTO supply. So over here, I actually have the BTO supply in the last 20 over years. And if you see over here, the 3-room flats are actually the ones in green and the 4-room flats are the one in turquoise. And if you take a look over here, you will notice that the 4-room flats are the major supply of the BTO year on year. This means that every year, a huge amount of 4-room flats will actually MOP and enter the resale market. So even if demand increased from the removal of the 15 months without period, I think we can be certain that the increase in demand can be easily absorbed by the steady supply of 4-room flats entering the market yearly. So this is why I don't expect a surge in prices or transaction volumes for the 3-room flats and 4-room flats. In fact, if you are an owner of a 3-room or 4-room flat in an area with a large amount of MOP supply upcoming, I think it's time for you to start thinking about your exit strategy and your exit timing. So if you're holding on to a 3 or 4-room flat but you're not sure about what's your upcoming competition and you're not sure what is the best step for you, please scan this QR code and I'll do an in-depth analysis and property journey roadmap for you. So now let's take a look at the impact on the 5-room flats and bigger HDB owners. Unlike the 3-room flats and 4-room flats, which make up a big bulk of the BTO supply, larger unit types actually do not have as much supply yearly. In fact, in recent BTO exercises, you might have noticed that for areas in the central locations, there hasn't been much 5 rooms that are being offered. And for executive maisonettes as well as executive apartments, they have stopped building a long time ago. EMs, I think they last built in 1995, and EAs probably in the early 2000s, they have already stopped building. So naturally, there will be fewer of such unit types that's entering the resale market. So now let's compare what happened after the 15 months wait-out period was introduced. So if we take a look at the 5-room HDB resale application submitted after the 15 months wait-out period was implemented in September 2022, we actually saw quite a huge drop in the number of resale applications. It was about 13%. So as compared to what we see in the 3-room and 4-room flats where volume remained relatively stagnant, we can see that the private property owners actually do make up a major group of buyers that are buying into the 5-room flats. And if we take a look at the executive HDBs, this includes our multi-gen, we see an even larger drop by about 20% after the implementation in 2022. So even though we cannot attribute 100% of this drop to be solely due to the private property right sizes, but for certain we can say that these private owners actually make up to a significant group of buyers for the 5-room and larger unit types. Hence, I think that this policy change will affect our 5-room and larger unit owners. But does this mean that every 5-room and larger HDB owners will suddenly see their price shoot up overnight? I would strongly say no. Okay, why? So let's think about why these private property owners are making this move in the first place. Many of them are actually moving from condo to HDB, some of them from landed to HDB. And these people, they are not necessarily trying to downgrade their lifestyle. In fact, what is their motivation to sell? I would say some of them just wants to reduce their mortgage payable, some wants to release funds for their retirement, some wants a larger living space probably for their growing family needs, some wants to lower their monthly commitment, and perhaps some just wants to cash out funds for other usage. So especially during COVID times when a lot of businesses were having cash flow issues, we do have some clients that were selling their landed properties even to actually just free out some cash to help with their business. So these people, they may right-size financially, but they will still try to preserve their current lifestyle. So they will still appreciate space, convenience, accessibility, and even privacy. So with more than sufficient funds, these buyers will naturally gravitate towards higher quality HDBs rather than just going for the cheapest option. So even back in 2022, when million-dollar flats were not so common, private owners were already splurging on such HDB. They make up to 34% of the buyers, accounting for the million-dollar flats. What type of HDBs were the first to hit the $1 million mark? So those were the larger unit types located in the more central areas. So likelihood the demand will search for bigger unit types with good attributes, such as good location that is at mature or central locations, those that are near MRT, convenient for daily living and closer to established amenities, well-maintained units with large and functional layouts, high-floor units with open views, or some might be the good schools nearby. So a unit with inefficient layout, poor facing, inconvenient location, or even aging lease, I feel that they will remain price sensitive. So if you currently own a desirable large HDB, I would actually not rush to accept any offer, especially if they are based on previous transactions, because those transactions happen due to previous market conditions. So I would not negotiate using yesterday's demand before understanding today's market. So even though the buyer pool has changed, this does not mean that you should immediately increase your selling price by an unreasonable amount, because you have to take into consideration other factors. For example, the competition and the upcoming supply of your estate. If 10 other units are selling in your estate with the same attributes, what makes you think that the buyer would be willing to pay a premium for your unit? So instead, I would first test the new market response. You can observe whether viewing inquiries increase, whether more buyers are really coming from the private properties, whether offers are arriving more quickly, and whether buyers are prepared to pay a premium for better attributes. So in summary, I don't think that the government removed this wait-out period to cause another price surge, okay? But instead, the government firmly believes and they are confident that the HDB market is now stabilized and this cooling measure is no longer necessary. While the overall market will not see a drastic increase in prices, there are still units that will stand to benefit and some units that will not see any change at all. So this means that moving forward, your property's performance will heavily depend on its own attributes and the competition within your estate. A single headline is rarely enough to change your property plans. The value comes from understanding how today's news will affect your property journey. Every estate is different, every buyer's profile is different, and the right strategy will not be the same for everyone. So if you found this analysis useful, I'll appreciate if you can like and subscribe to my channel. If you are considering to sell your HDB and you are wondering how this policy change will affect your selling strategy, please reach out to me, buyer looking to buy a HDB, or if you are a private property owner looking to right size into a HDB or a larger unit type, or if you're just exploring your options, please reach out to me as well and I'll be happy to do a personalized roadmap for you. If not, I'll see you in the next episode. Bye!